From workouts. In the last Strength University, we talked about mobilization, why we do soft tissue work, why we foam roll, why we do our warm-up exercises before we actually go into the workout. Today we're going to be talking about primer exercises. Who knows what our primer exercises are? Most of you guys have been in here and been a little bit confused about like the layout of the board. Basically, whenever we go through the first part of the workout, it's the first two sets of 2 to 3 exercises that we do that prepare you guys for the workout before we actually get into the main meat of the program. So who knows why we do primer exercises? That is a great answer. So you don't injure yourself. Anybody else? So basically, think of this as your extended warm-up. Before we go into the actual heavy lifts, we have you guys, some of you guys are getting pretty heavy. Think about the deadlift days whenever we come in here. We want you guys to wake up those muscles before we actually get into the exercises. And like we said, so that we don't hurt ourselves, so we can get that blood flowing. One scientific answer that I'll give you is so that we can get muscle potentiation. It's so that we can activate our nervous system before we go into those exercises, making sure that your body's familiar with the movement patterns that we're going to be going through. So you can think about the different days that we have for the different workouts. We have deadlifts, we have squats, we have bench presses. Each of these exercises, they fall into a different category. You have upper body push, you have lower body push, upper body pull, lower body pull. Some of our movements where we go into, think about like our tripod rows or even our landmine rows, we're gonna be doing a lower body pull by holding those hamstrings, but we're also gonna be doing an upper body pull. So for some of these exercises, you guys are activating multiple muscle groups before we go into that, and we need a little bit more than the stretches that we do in our warm-ups to do that. Think about our glute bridges. Sometimes we have you guys doing a glute bridge and a bench press put together, so we want to make sure that the whole body's warmed up for that. Do you have anything to add into here?
Yes, so when we're doing that, I know some of you have been here when I've had the girls over in the corner. I have some younger girls that I train. So you've seen them do some explosive jumps. You've seen them do box jumps that are like up to here, they're wild. But a lot of times we'll start those movements by doing a potentiation exercise. So post-activation potentiation. So they start with a heavy deadlift, going for not a whole lot of reps, but they're focusing on the movement, activating through all of those muscle groups in that same hinge movement. And then when they come over, they go into a jump. All of those muscles are turned on. It's like an amplifier. They've all been turned on. It makes the signal a little bit louder. So that way when they go into the jump, they're using all of that to be able to get a little bit more height on their jumps. So that's kind of how they tie in together, giving a specific exercise for it. But we're gonna go through a little test here. So when everybody sit down, relax every muscle in your body, your face, everything, toes, all the way down to the toes. And I want you to bring your right hand up, unless you're a lefty, use your left hand. And I want you to just with your fist, make a fist as hard as you can. Relax everywhere else. Hold it for 5 seconds. All right, and then relax, shake it out, fast and loose that we all know now. Now I want you to stand up, and I want you to tighten every muscle in your body, your quads, your glutes, core, everything, even through your jaw. And now I want you to make a fist with that hand as hard as you can. And then relax. Did you notice a difference between the two? Yes. What was the difference that you felt?
Stronger fist.
Stronger fist. You activated everywhere else. You built tension in other areas. That way you could make a stronger fist. So when we're thinking about going through our exercises, like we'll continue to use the example of the deadlift. When you're going through your deadlift, you're bracing all those other areas, even though the main muscle groups that you're using, glutes, hamstrings, yes, your core, lats, you're engaging everywhere. That way you're able to get a little bit more power, a little bit more strength as you come up.
Have you ever gotten out of a car from a long car ride? I remember whenever I was a little kid, I used to think it was like a cool stretch and I thought it felt good and my parents thought I was crazy. Now that I'm past 30, whenever I get out of that car, I feel it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to take a few like little hurdle steps before I actually go out and walk. Same concept, whenever you guys sleep in the fist analogy, you don't have that strength. Your forearms haven't been used for literally 9 hours if you're sleeping properly. Some of us maybe a little bit less. But if you squeeze your fist like maybe 2-3 times for 10 seconds, you're gonna be able to get that tension a little bit more. So think about what Molly just did. You guys all just stood up. Hopefully you felt a little bit more strength in that fist from when you were sitting to when you were standing. But what does GLAG actually stand for?
GLAG stands for glutes, lats, abs, and grip. So we're gonna go through a little trial of these things. Before I said try and create tension everywhere. Now we're gonna go through some specifics. So we're gonna start with glutes. And I have a weird analogy for this one. It's a Nick analogy, actually. So bear with me. But standing about feet shoulder width apart, you're gonna take your hand. You're going to put it in between your butt cheeks. All right, and I want you to pretend that your butt cheeks have teeth. And you're gonna try and squeeze your hand between your butt cheeks. Does everybody feel that? That's why the hand is there, so that you can feel it. Everybody feel that? Yes, yes. Okay, you can relax for a second. So we're gonna practice that again. You don't have to use your hand this time, but squeezing through your glutes. We're gonna hold it for 10 seconds. Squeeze through your glutes as hard as you can. Make sure you breathe, especially if you're at that breathing workshop. 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, and relax. Okay. Next one we're gonna go through is your lats. So for your lats, I want you to pretend that you have 2 oranges between your armpits. And you're gonna try and squeeze those oranges between your armpits and then point your fingertips all the way down to the floor as hard as you can.
Juice those oranges and point to the
Juice them,
floor.
squeeze.
Make those arms as long as you can.
Good, relax for a second. I wanna add another step to that. Make sure your shoulders aren't rounding forward. Keep your shoulders pulled back. We're gonna do it again. Shoulders down and back. Drive the fingertips down, squeeze the oranges. If you notice I'm shaking a little bit, you should have that much tension. Breathe. 3, 2, 1, and relax. Next one we have abs. So I'm gonna stand sideways, that way you guys can see. But when I'm bracing through my core, what we don't want, sometimes we'll use the idea of rib cage towards your hips, but when you do that, you don't wanna shrink. You don't want your shoulders to round forward. I want you to think, yes, tension towards your rib cage, towards your hips, but pretend I was gonna go karate chop Bobby right in the stomach, how he'd brace himself for that. So pretend, I know you guys have heard me say that a lot of times. You're always ready. So now we're gonna use that next, keeping your core braced. If I came around and poked, make sure when you do that, you breathe. Don't hold your breath. 5, 3, 2, 1, and relax. All right, the last one we're gonna go through is grip. So kind of the fist thing that we were doing earlier. So now you're going to bring your hands to your sides, make a fist with your hands as hard as you can. Keep your shoulders pulled back. Breathe. 3, 2, 1, and relax, shake it out. All right, we're gonna do some fast and loose here for a second, and we're gonna try and tie it all together. We're gonna go 2 practice rounds here. Bringing it all together. We're gonna start with the glutes, the teeth. So feet shoulder width apart, squeezing through your glutes as hard as you can. Now we're gonna add the lats, shoulders down and back, driving the fingertips down, squeezing the oranges. Now the abs, bracing through your core, if I was gonna come poke you. And now add in the grip, gripping as hard as you can. Breathe, breathe, keep all that tension. And then relax, fast and loose again. But doing that, the intention that you had going step by step, sometimes we do need to break it down step by step until you feel comfortable doing that all at once. It's helpful to break it down a little bit at a time.
And another thing that I want to point out is think about it. We were just talking about your grip strength there. And you can think about, that relates to every single exercise in this room. We're gripping weights for the most part. We're using different muscle groups. We used your glutes, your lats, your abs to get that grip strength more, or higher. So those different muscle groups, they're gonna play an overall role in how your body performs whenever we go through those lifts. We're gonna stay safer as we go through it, but we're also gonna be able to lift heavier. You're gonna get better results out of your programming and what you do with your workouts from those warm-up sets. So starting out a little bit lighter, and that's what we're gonna start to talk about, is these exercises, they're meant to be done extremely light. You guys can actually go ahead and take a seat if you'd like again, unless you'd like to stand. But these exercises are gonna be done, for the most part, either at a body weight or an extremely light weight as we get you guys ready for the heavier sets. And depending on what the exercise is, what we're doing for that day, those lighter weights might look a little bit different. You guys remember some of the days we had 15 reps in our sets? So we didn't put that technically in the primer sections because we didn't want to confuse anybody, but those exercises were true primer sets. If you guys think about whenever we go into a lot of the other days, We do the main strength exercises for 4 to 6 sets. That's a lot of volume. We don't expect you guys to go straight into that first set, doing the heaviest weight and then doing that 5 more times as you go through. We expect you guys to use those as primer sets and warm yourself up to it so that we have 1 to 2 sets of lighter weights, and then we have 3 sets where we can really push ourselves, maybe 4 if we have a little bit extra time. So, kind of touching on the first Strength University that we went through, we have the warm-up before we go into this stuff. So we want to make sure that you guys have your body stretched out, have those muscles woken up. We're doing the things like our glute bridges, our iron crosses, our band pull-aparts, and our push-ups, which are also primer exercises if you guys think about it. Some days whenever you come in here, we do a slow push-up. We do a push-up with a pause. We might do side plank clamshells. We might have you guys do no monies before we go into the bigger exercises like our rows, so that your posterior chain muscle group, which is all the muscles on the backside of your body, they're woken up before we go into the heavier weights. So if we have things like shoulder issues, or if we want to prevent future shoulder issues, we can make sure that the body's going into everything with good form. Chances are I've come over to you and told you shoulders down and back. I probably told you many, many times. Chest and belt buckle together. Squeeze your butt. Those 3 things are gonna carry over to every single exercise that we do in this gym, and really throughout life to keep yourself protected. So we're gonna start to go into some hands-on exercises, but like we talked about in the last Strength University, what's the first step whenever we walk through this room?
What'd you grab when you came in?
What did we grab on that wall?
Foam roller.
All right, let's get our foam roller and let's start doing some soft tissue mobilization. We're not gonna spend a ton of time on this, but I want you guys to roll out and get properly warmed up before we go into the primer exercises. Like we said, we're going through the series of a workout, so this is gonna be the primer exercises, getting you ready for the main strength sets. In our next Strength University, that's what we're gonna be talking about. We're gonna be talking about our strength exercises. That's gonna be the really fun one, okay? But this is where we're gonna talk about getting prepared for that, which I think is just as much fun. Who knows why we foam roll? Now, while we're talking about this, I want you guys to start getting your glutes. So go ahead, choose a butt cheek. I want you to roll back and forth on that butt cheek 5 to 10 times. You can do that with your foot on the floor or your foot over your knee, just like Molly is.
As Bobby's talking, I'm gonna cycle through different foam rolling. So if you guys watch me as he's talking, we'll cycle through the whole body for foam rolling. If you're not comfortable sitting on your foam roller, there are other ways that we can do it with lacrosse ball, tennis ball. So another example could be grabbing one of these. Lacrosse ball, tennis ball, you can use your bench, sitting on your bench here, and you can also do some rolling out here as well. Find a spot. If you're not comfortable rolling back and forth, you could also find a point, lifting up and back down.
Real quick. Now, let's say we have a specific area of our body. Let's say that we're injured and we're not able to, we have a knee injury and we don't want to put a ton of weight on our body, on the front of our leg. We use this instead. We have multiple different tools. If we have a little piece in the back of our shoulder that is hard to get to with that foam roller, we got these big candy canes back there. You can get all over the place. If your butt's hurting, you can get back here like this. You can do really virtually any area of the body, but who knows why we foam roll? It doesn't technically stretch the muscle, but I'll carry off of that, and it does offer temporary flexibility, okay? So there's not any changes at a cellular level to the muscle itself, but it does offer temporary flexibility. And while we're talking about that, why is that important? Think about, I'm always gonna relate things back to a deadlift. I love deadlifts. Now, deadlifts, I love it. Now, deadlifts, one of my philosophies on deadlifts is that if we are not able to touch our toes without bending our knees, then we probably should not be deadlifting off of the bare floor. That's too much range of motion if we don't have that mobility. That's why we have things like DC blocks, and we have some of you guys use them from time to time. Think about this. If I can't touch my toes and I go down into a position where I'm trying to grab that bell, I'm gonna have to round my back to do it, which is gonna be compensating, and ultimately, I might cause an injury down the road just simply because I don't have the mobility for that. So, foam rolling, it does offer temporary flexibility. You should feel slight discomfort, okay? Whenever you first start working out, that's actually, it'll touch into my next point about why foam rolling is useful, but whenever you first start working out, just like a lot of the exercises that we do, your body's not used to this. Think of this as a massage for your body. If you've ever watched the Olympics, have you ever seen on the sidelines and back in the locker rooms, they have hundreds and hundreds of athletic trainers and masseuses that are giving regular pre-warm-up massages based on the events that they're doing. We don't have the money to pay for that before every workout. We're gonna come in here and just get some foam rolling in. It's gonna do just as much for us, okay? Now, one of the other reasons that a lot of people don't realize, like one of the benefits of foam rolling, it increases your pain tolerance. It lets your body understand that just because a muscle is in discomfort, it doesn't mean that it's injured. It doesn't mean that pain, so slight discomfort and slight pain sometimes is a good thing. That lets me know if I come in here and I start foam rolling my hamstrings and I do have deadlifts that day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my hamstrings are so tight right now. Maybe I don't go as heavy as I did last week on my deadlifts. Listen to your body. Pain's a really good tool, and discomfort's a really good tool to gauge what we should be doing for that day. So it sets you up with an idea of what position your body's in to work out for that day as well. But one of the biggest reasons that I like foam rolling is it simply hydrates your muscles. It gets blood flowing around. It gets fluid moving around. Let me ask you this. If you had two different pieces of meat, if you had a piece of beef jerky and a nice big filet mignon, what would you rather your muscles look like? That dry, flaky beef jerky, whenever you move it, it starts cracking and ripping? Or do you want that nice filet mignon?
Filet mignon.
Exactly. So this is essentially, think of what foam rolling is doing for your body. It is turning those beef jerky dry muscles that we don't use a lot into some nice tender filet mignon. Okay, we're tenderizing ourselves before we get into the movements.
Tenderizing.
Now that we got through some of our foam rolling, one thing that I like to touch on with this as well, and I've had a lot of you guys do this with the lacrosse balls, going against a wall, finding a sweet spot. Let's all get on our quads like Molly is right now and get the front of our legs. But I tell you guys to find that spot that really stands out. And once you find it, hold it there and move your muscle around. So if you look at Molly, she's gonna find a sweet spot on her quads. And if you guys were in here yesterday for our sumo squats, we're probably gonna feel it a little bit somewhere. Find that sweet spot that stands out a little bit more than the others, hold it there, and I want you to flex and extend the muscle.
I didn't do sumo squats, but I feel it.
Yep, do them one leg at a time. Lengthen that muscle, stretch it, shorten it, find a different sweet spot. You can go to the inner thigh of your quad. You can go towards the outside of it. These are all, your quad, think about the name for what it is. Quad is four. There's 4 different muscles in that one muscle group. At this point, we are not gonna go through the full cat-cow sequence, band pull, because we're gonna be doing other stuff today, but our body's ready for the primer exercises. We got loose and we got activated, we're woken up a little bit, now it's time to prime and prep. There's essentially 4 different categories of your movement patterns. Think of your upper body and your lower body, and don't think too deep. What are they? We have upper body, we have lower body, and lower body. Good. So we're going to be doing pushing and pull movements pretty much across the board. We do other planes of motion where we do rotational exercises, but for the most part, almost all of the exercises that we do in here are going to fall into those 4 categories to some extent. Some of them are going to fall into multiple categories. So you'll see, and you'll probably have questions as we go through this, well, doesn't this technically warm this up? Probably yes, and we'll talk about that. So for upper body push, we're going to talk about the most basic one, but what's a very common exercise that we do every single day in our warm-ups off of the floor? Push-ups, yes.
Crowd favorite, crowd favorite.
Now we're gonna talk, who in here can easily just go straight into a push-up with no effort whatsoever?
Not high,
Okay.
not high.
Me either. So we wanna make sure as we set the ground for all of this, we're gonna be going over exercises, but we wanna go over these exercises at an extremely light or even body weight resistance, okay? We wanna make sure, think back to the 15 rep exercises that we were going through in this last phase. I told a lot of you guys that I wanted you starting with just the bar. If the bar is too much, I want you starting body weight. We want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position of failure before we go into the main sets of movement, because we don't want ourselves to get set up with bad form. The whole point of these primer exercises is to get yourself familiar with good movement patterns before we go into it. So before we start talking about this, we do 10 push-ups in almost all of our warm-ups. I would highly encourage you guys to set yourself up so that these 10 push-ups are easy enough that you're able to focus on the small details. You're able to pull your shoulders down and back from your ears. You're able to take the time between your reps without feeling like you're about to fail out and focus on your breathing. Keeping a good, well, I guess it's hard to grip, but keeping all of the muscle fibers all the way from your shoulders to your fingers engaged. Those little things are gonna carry over as we go into the main exercises, which we're gonna show you, like a bench press. If we start out, and this isn't making fun of anybody in here, if we start out and we come in here and we just rapidly go through 10 of these like this, think about what this is gonna do and translate over into as I start doing my bench press. If I notice that I have some shoulder pain in my upper shoulder, if I notice that my low back is bothering me as I go through things like bench press, that's a good sign that I didn't prime myself up properly and get myself into a good movement pattern sequence before I go into those. So with that big long-winded rant, I wanna make sure that whenever we set ourselves up on things like pads, that we're at a proper height and not having bad form through these. We wanna focus on really, really, really good form. So for a pad push-up, if we're not able to do a regular push-up, we're gonna go over 2 different regressions. We have our pad push-ups, which are really, really good at activating your core, making sure you're keeping your shoulders down and back, but we can also go a step further, and we'll show you guys a barbell push-up as well. For the pad push-up, technically, I call this a hand release push-up. I want Molly to go ahead and just simply lay down on the pads. So if you look at her, even though she's using support here, her elbows are at less than 90 degrees. She's still technically at a full push-up right now. I want her to make sure that she's keeping her hips and chest at the same level as she goes up and down. Shoulders are down and back like always. We're breathing each rep so that we can keep that core engaged and not go into a worm position. Molly, can you show me what we don't want here? Yes.
Or.
Now what we do want, now with that, her butt came up pretty high. It's okay if you exaggerate the areas that are a little bit tougher. If you notice that you have a wormy push-up and you let your hips slide down towards the floor, if you very slightly push your hips up and exaggerate that, that's gonna help as you go into this. So Molly, let's go ahead and do a push-up by raising your hands. We're gonna place them back down. If you look, her hands are pretty vertical in relation to her elbows, and we're gonna push through. Good. Now each rep, she's gonna pick her hands up and put them back down. Now if you look, this is a little bit tough for her. If I'm warming her up for a bench press, I don't want her struggling here. It might seem a little bit silly for some of us. I'm gonna give Molly 5 pads right here. And think, nobody has to put their hand up, but if I've came over to you while you had 2 pads before and said, maybe we should do a couple more, think about your trainer right here, and she's using 5, okay? So let's go ahead and lay back down.
5's the sweet spot.
Now with that being said, everybody has a different body type. Molly might be a little bit taller than some of you, where 5 pads for her still has her at about 90 degrees, just slightly above it at her elbows. For some of us in here, 2 pads might put us at a position where our arms are even higher than that. So use what works for your body. But Molly, can I have you focus on all of those? Shoulders down and back, hips up. We're breathing and exhaling. See how clean that was compared to 2 pads ago? If I was telling her to set herself up with the best possible form for a bench press today, I want her doing this for her 10 push-ups rather than the other. Now, if we're in our working sets and we're doing push-ups in the main movements, maybe she takes one of those pads away and really pushes herself, challenges herself, but not for the warm-up and the primers, okay? So what I'm gonna have all of you guys do, we're gonna go over the next one real quick, which is gonna be a barbell push-up, but after this, I'm gonna have us break out a little bit and we're gonna work on push-ups, okay? With a barbell push-up, you're gonna start out with your hands directly underneath your chest. So you're gonna be at an angle. You're not gonna be completely parallel to the floor, but we wanna make sure that we're on our toes. And as you lower down to the bar, we wanna make sure that our sternum, the top of our ribs, the bottom of our chest is touching that bar. One thing that I really like to pay attention to as she goes down, if you look at her wrists and her elbows, they're vertically stacked. Her elbows aren't buckling out. They're in a V, not a T, as she goes down with her arms.
I'm gonna show not.
And she showed it. Now, the first thing that she did right here, which you guys might not have seen, her wrists slid off of the bar. So if we're using things like a barbell, we're teaching ourselves every little joint from the wrist to the elbow to the shoulder tightness, how to stay in tension. Don't overthink that as you go into your push-ups, because you are gonna have a flexed wrist. With that being said, if you're able to handle the tension of knuckles on the floor, you're gonna feel a lot more chest activation and a lot healthier in your shoulders. For people like me who have a torn shoulder labrum and have a lot of pain, I do all of my push-ups off of my knuckles because I have to not have pain. So going through this, little cues to think about, we're squeezing our shoulders down and back. You wanna break the bar even if you don't have a bar in your hands so we can set those shoulders and keep the wrists and elbows vertically stacked as we go up and down. If we don't keep the wrists tight or pack our shoulders, you can expect those elbows to start flaring out. So think about the little cues. If we have a newspaper on the floor, and Molly's gonna touch on this later too with our lower body, but if you have a newspaper on the floor, everybody get on their hands and knees real quick. If you have a yoga mat, it's even better. Let's place your hands on that yoga mat. I want you to rip that yoga mat apart without physically moving your hands. We're gonna rip it from the middle by twisting our hands apart. And you can see my fingers, you can see the tension I'm creating, but I'm not actually moving. We wanna rip that apart. Now take that grip, transition it to your elbows and your shoulders, pull them down and back. That's how we should feel before we go into our push-ups. If you've been with me for the movements like our landmine rows, I've told you to break the bar before. That's doing the same thing. All we're doing is activating all of these muscles into our lats. We're gonna go pretty heavy on our bench press. Let's start with a weight that is anywhere between 50 to 70% of what we would plan on doing in our workout. So I would say if I plan on doing 40 pounds in my workout for 8 reps over the 4 to 6 sets, I'm gonna start out my first set with 25. So let's go ahead. With that being said, if you're using 20s on a regular day in your workouts for bench press, I would grab 10 to 15 pounds. And we're gonna go a little bit heavier in the second set, just so you guys can wake those muscles up. So let's go ahead and grab some light dumbbells. So for a bench press, just a little refresher for everybody. So if you don't have a pair of dumbbells, just head over to a bench, or if you don't see the pair that you need, and chances are they're already there. So let's go ahead. Make sure that we're set up in a position like Kathy's doing over there where we can put our heels down on the floor. We're gonna start out with the dumbbells directly over our chest. I want your shoulders down and back away from the ears. If you look, my knees are super wide, like I have a glute loop around them. There's a slight arch in my lower back. I'm gonna inhale, brace my core, tap my chest, and then press through. All right, let's go ahead and get to that bench. Do some bench presses.
All the areas that you're bracing, exhaling as you're pressing up.
While you guys are working your chest here, think about every other muscle group that's supporting you. Your glutes are supporting you by pressing your heels down. Your core is braced because we're breathing each rep. Our lats are squeezed back.
And make sure we're safely racking and unracking when you're setting up. Remember, you start with the dumbbells on your knees, you rock yourself back, the dumbbells start over your chest. Same with your unracking, we're not flopping them down to the side. You can bring your knees up, bring the dumbbells to your knees, and you're rocking yourself up. Good, make those light weights feel heavy. Focus on tempo, slow on the way down.
On your second set, I want you, be smart about this, and you can adjust your weight as needed, but I'd say about 10 pounds heavier than what we just did. Maybe 5 to 10 pounds heavier. If we're not going super heavy on a bench press, there's no need to make a super heavy jump. I just got a question, should my lower back be against the bench or should it be up? That's really common. If I'm being honest, bench press is one of the only exercises that I know of in my whole entire library where I would say that it is completely okay to have a slight arch in your lower back as long as you are driving your knees outward and keeping your shoulders down and back while breathing each rep. That's my checklist for every single exercise. Shoulders down and back, core
Right
tight,
at the end.
butt
So
squeeze.
come up to the
As
top.
long as you're
Come
doing
over.
that, your
I want you to
entire
think about
spine
engaging
is
through
being
those lats,
protected
just
by the
like you do on the
musculature around
push-ups.
it.
Pretend like it's
So
that
you're
bar
gonna
you're bringing
notice
in half.
if I
Squeeze the
arch
shoulder
my
blades together
shoulders,
as you lower
the
it
first
down.
thing that happens is my lower back comes
Yes,
up.
and then
Now
you
right
back
now, my core and my belly aren't tense.
How the shoulders feel on that
Now,
one.
if I'm squeezing
Good.
and breathing,
I don't
they
feel
are,
it,
and my
I
low
feel
back is gonna be supported and protected.
how I know I'm
You're
not
not
doing
gonna
it
injure
right.
your low
the
back
fact that you can
unless you
feel
go
that,
into like
though,
an
that's the most important.
excessive
Okay, I can't do
deep arch,
It's okay.
which I'm never gonna recommend
good.
anybody in here does. Upper body push. What do you think would come after that for the upper body? We have our pull movements, okay? So the muscles that we're engaging here, there's a ton of muscles in your back. One of the most important ones that I want you guys to think about is your rear deltoids. That's behind your shoulder. That's your band pull apart muscle. Think about that burn that we get behind our shoulders right here. Your deltoid is just this meaty little muscle here. We're working our lats, we're working our traps, but whenever we do our pull aparts, they're gonna set us not only up for the upper body pull movements, but really every single exercise that we do across the board. What's one cue, if you're in the afternoons, that I give to you almost 20 times a day? I say it regularly. I've said it probably 30 times today alone. Shoulders back and down away from the ears. That's gonna set you up in a position so that you're gonna have that straight, flat spine all throughout all of your movements in the day. I'm just gonna do a simple band pull apart against the bench without even trying to over exaggerate what I'm talking about, and look at the position where my shoulders are. Hopefully this doesn't snap me. Okay, I'm right here. If I bring my hands in, I'm in a perfect spot for my bench press. Think about what I just showed you guys, where you want this stretch in your chest compared to your shoulders dumping forward. Simply pulling that band apart is gonna put your shoulders into that position, okay? So I like to take it a little step further whenever I do band pull aparts. I like to do it on a position where I'm laying on my back. So I actually want all of you guys to lay down on the floor as straight as you can, flexing your toes towards your nose. And let's try to press the back of our knees against the floor. We're gonna activate, just like we did in our GLAG, every single muscle fiber in our body. Before we even start pulling that band apart, I want you to think about squeezing those glutes together. We're gonna engage the lats with a band pull apart, but we're gonna start out a little bit extra by holding our hands above the chest. I want you to pretend that this band is a steel bar, and I want you to break it in half. Set those lats into place, break that band. Squeeze that grip, keep your core tight, and let's pull that band apart to the sternum. Think about your lower chest.
So that break the band.
Now remember, we're gonna do 10 reps here. If you guys
that
are able to
breaking
do a
of the
little bit,
band
now
in
we
half
can
that
come
you
up
said,
and down. I see
still
some of
keep
us holding it there. That's
your,
awesome, great job.
Instead of turning all the way out, still yeah.
Let's keep
yeah.
our head back. Now I'm gonna have you guys do anywhere from
Yep,
10 to
the
20
lats,
reps
yeah.
of this. If we can do 20 reps with good form, I want you to do that.
Make sure we're keeping the wrists nice and straight.
Remember, this band pull apart is setting you up for every single exercise across the board, upper and lower body.
forget the toes,
We want to
keep
make
the
sure
toes
those legs
flexed.
are engaged. Toes to the nose, your knees are pressed to the floor. We're squeezing our butt. Now, after you do 10 to 20 reps, if our form is starting to break down, I
does
want you to
this feel
stop.
for your
I don't want you to go through sloppy reps.
How does it feel?
And that's actually a very good cue. When we come together with our hands, I don't want you to relax. I don't want that band to be floppy. I want you to keep some tension, like a guitar string, nice and tight. Now, I want you guys to think about the difficulty of this band pull apart compared to your first set. Do we feel like it's easier to keep good form and keep those cues that we were going over? Remember, shoulders down and back. Stay tall, but chest and belt buckle together. Squeeze those oranges behind the armpits, even though your armpits are a little bit extended out right now. Break that bar, toes to the nose. Ask these questions. I'm not looking for you guys to be yes men and just blindly agree with me. Did we notice in that second set that not only was it a little bit easier to perform the movement, but did we feel the muscles working more? And not necessarily working more to failure, but we just simply felt the muscle working more. Okay, cool. So that, I know it's simple, but that's why we do this stuff. We want to make sure that we're waking those muscles up. If you guys walked straight in through the door and you were late because you were busy at work, or it's 5 a.m. and you didn't wake up until 4:50 and you just got in here, I'm not going to tell you to come over here, go straight into 10 band pull. See, I didn't warm up like you guys did. That was hard for me. My shoulder, I'm gonna be honest, that didn't feel too great. Okay, so enough said.
Well, what Bobby just said brings up a good point. As I was walking around, I heard some of you say, now I can really feel if I'm not doing it right. I feel it not right through my shoulders. I get discomfort. These are good. Listen to your body when those things happen. Take a second, pause, yep, reset.
Why don't we always apply this necessarily in our workouts? We as coaches are always striving to get better. We, Nick and I, Molly, Laura, Matt and Lynn, we all get together every single month. We talk about programming. We talk about things that have worked well in the past. We talk about things that we could do better in the future. If you think about what we're currently doing, our warm-up that we do right now hits every single muscle group in your body. We do every single muscle action a minimum of 2 times before we get you guys into the workout. What we're gonna do now is just make it even better than it already is. So now we're gonna go into our tripod row, next upper body pull. We're gonna set it up with 3 points of contact. Think about the tripod that Matt's carrying around the room right now. There's not weight on 2 of those and then not the other. All 3 of them, the weight's distributed evenly. Molly's gonna place her palm down on the bench, and she's gonna have about 33% of her weight on all 3 joints, her heels and her hand. Let's go ahead and grab that weight. See how her back is flat, parallel to the floor. Her shoulders are down and back. She's squeezing her glutes. I'm gonna give her a little nudge here, and she's not gonna move an inch because she's real strong and braced. And she's gonna pull with her elbow close to the ribs. One very important thing is that she's keeping a tight grip here. She's able to engage all of those muscles in her back. I want you to grip that especially tight with the pinky, the ring finger, and the middle finger, and you're gonna notice the biggest difference in what you feel in your lats and your back as you do this. Let's go up and down. Notice how her back is staying tall as she goes up and down.
And when I come down, I'm not unpacking through my shoulder.
Exactly.
Keep the shoulder pulled down and back, and that helps with the grip that you were talking about too.
The last little key that I'm gonna give that Molly's focusing on is she's keeping her knees wide as if she had a glute loop on. That's gonna help her keep her glutes engaged. And whenever I gave her that nudge, it's gonna make sure that she doesn't fall over side to side. Those little cues are gonna help you pull a lot more weight, but it's also gonna help you do it, feel the muscles better, feel the muscles more, and do it in a safer way. We're not gonna get shoulder pain. We're not gonna be rounded forward, and you're gonna feel better through your sets. So should we have?
Let's do 1 set of 10 on each side.
Let's go ahead and grab, you can grab some of the dumbbells that have been used already, and we can also set up multiple people on one bench as long as you guys aren't bumping heads together. You probably are wondering, do we have to prime ourselves for every single exercise across the board? Not necessarily. If you are already primed, we just did band pull-aparts for our upper body row. Think about the support that you're doing with your hand on the bench. That's an upper body push, technically. So we're starting to trickle into the area where you're using multiple muscle groups, you're doing multiple things for each exercise. Those push-ups that we just did, the bench press, that warmed you up for this. It's making sure that those muscles are already woken up. If we go into lower body after this, I would like to do a little bit more, but you guys are all in a hinged position right now. We're starting to wake the hamstrings and the glutes up for what's to come next. So just think about all of that as you go through this.
Even though we're talking about that arm that is rowing up, I don't want you to forget about the arm that's bracing on the bench. Make sure you're not shrugging up, you're packing that shoulder down too. When you pack down that one side, the other side typically follows too.
What should we do with our knees?
Slight bend in the knees, drive them out.
Soft bend in the knees. Remember those small cues. We're breathing each rep. Our shoulders are down and back away from the ears, especially the supporting arm.
Right now? If I asked you guys, if you removed your hand from the bench, would you fall over?
No.
If you said yes, I want you to adjust your foot position.
Now, as you guys are in this position, if I've ever corrected you halfway through a set, I've probably told you to put your weight down and stand up. I don't want you guys to hold a hinged position. This alone should be taking a lot of work. We're basically doing a isometric deadlift. If I told you guys to do a squat hold, would you comfortably sit there and listen to my explanation? Same thing here. No. So let's make sure that we stand up. Let's loosen it out. Let's get those feet moving around a little bit. Let those muscles relax. Actively relax.
Fast and loose.
So we did upper body push, upper body pull. We have lower body push now. Who can think of the most common lower body push exercises? Anybody besides Matt? Squats. What's very similar to a squat, but we only do one at a time, one leg at a time?
Split squat.
Lunges and split squats,
Yeah.
perfect. Split squats and lunges. So think about it, the things that you're pushing away with your lower body. Now we're still gonna be using a lot of those muscles in the backside for your hinges and your glutes and your hamstrings, but one of the most common primer exercises that we have for our squats is a banded squat. Think about another really common cue that I've probably given to every single person in this room. I don't want to see those knees buckling together whenever we're squatting. This not only looks weird, but it doesn't feel too great here, and it doesn't feel great on my lower back, right? This looks a lot better, a lot more stable. So we're gonna warm those muscles up that we need to keep our knees wide by simply putting a rubber band around them and forcing them to work. So Molly is set up against a band. Notice how she's already creating tension with that band by pulling her arms backwards. Her shoulders are engaged. She's bracing her core. She's gonna squat down while simultaneously driving her knees wider and wider and wider. If her butt's going lower, her knees are going wider. There's no question on that. And let's stand back up. Molly, where'd you feel that?
A lot of places.
A lot of places?
The glutes.
If we didn't
Glutes
have that
especially.
band on, where would you not have felt it as much?
Probably not through my glutes through here without the band.
Yep. So we have a bunch of yellow bands back there. For this exercise, don't want anybody using a level 2, or you can use a level 2 glute loop. I want to make sure that you're not using a band that's too heavy for you. So some of us might need to use those yellow bands. Can everybody grab a band real quick? And we're going to have you guys do some TRX
have mine.
banded squats. You don't necessarily need to use this TRX band. If you're extremely confident in your form for your squats, and you know that whenever you go down, you're not rounding forward, your knees aren't buckling together, we might not need to use those TRX bands. Maybe I use an extremely light dumbbell or a plate as my counterbalance, and I focus on my primers like this. For me personally, this isn't putting me into a position where I'm gonna reach failure by 10 reps. I'm gonna wake all of those muscles up. Honestly, I'm gonna use my core and my legs a little bit more than if I would have over there, and it's gonna make me even more prepared for my day. So if you're somebody that doesn't need the TRX band, you don't necessarily have to use the TRX band. With that being said, we're aiming for perfect form here. So if you need it, use it. Let's get to it.
I am one who uses the TRX.
Now, if you have that band on, you can slip it off if you'd like to. You don't have to. Just don't trip over yourself when you do fast and loose.
Another
Shoulders down and back.
tidbit
Let's
that has
keep
helped
as we
me,
go down.
if we don't have the glute
Very
loop
good.
on,
Sorry if I
another
took you
way I
forward a
like
little
to
bit.
build tension is pretend like you're standing on a giant piece of paper. And you're gonna try and use your feet to rip that piece of paper straight through the middle. So doing that activates through my glutes. So that's another way if you don't have a glute loop on to keep that tension. But think about it while you're doing it with these loops.
So after you guys finish these reps, go ahead and put your band away, and or your glute loop, either or what you have. And we're gonna
Nice,
grab
Susan.
onto a light kettlebell, anywhere 35 pounds
Those
or
are
below.
good.
We're gonna be doing a good morning hip hinge next.
Someone can steal mine when I'm done.
Gone through an assessment with Matt. I know that you have probably had one of these dowels in your hand before. We're gonna be going through, like I said, our good morning hip hinges. This, if I'm being honest, is probably our most universal primer. You use a hip hinge so many times, let alone in one workout session, but throughout your day. If you have back pain in general, chances are we can work on our hip hinge and get a little bit better at it so that, especially when you guys come in here, at least for the hour that you're with us, we're bettering it and not damaging it, okay? We're gonna be focusing on, first, I'm gonna show you guys what we look for in our hip hinge. Notice how she has this straight pull. Naturally, our spine isn't a straight pull, but we can try to mimic that as closely as we can. We're gonna keep the back of our head, the back of our shoulders, and the back of our tailbone against this. She's gonna hold that there. Top hand's gonna support it a little bit more. But the little things that I want you guys to think about, just like our GLAG checklist, it's literally across the board for everything that we do. She's gonna pull her shoulders down and back and get her lats engaged. She's gonna keep her core tight by bracing the chest and belt buckle together, but she has to stay tall or else her head's gonna dip off. She's pushing her butt backwards while keeping her glutes tight and squeezing that pull. Now she's gonna simply bend the knees. A lot of people are mistaken here, and they think that the goal is to get your chest as low to the floor as she can. Look what happens as soon as she does that. Who in here has ever had lower back pain? Okay? Chances are it either came from a little too much of this or a little too much of this, okay? Let's make sure that we're keeping that as straight and neutral as possible. Think about pushing your butt to the wall behind you, not to the floor below you. One thing I like to show everybody, Molly, do you consider yourself flexible? Can you touch your toes? So one thing that I like to demonstrate, I can touch my toes pretty easily. I don't think I'm the most flexible person, but I do think I'm a little flexible. If I'm doing something like a hip hinge or an RDL, let's pretend that I'm holding, here, I'll hold a weight right here. I just showed you guys that I have no problem touching my toes. When I'm going into this hinge position, if you look at my legs, they're quivering because they're at a full stretch right now. My hands aren't even below my knees, okay? So the goal that the thing that I'm constantly thinking about as we go through this is how far can I push my butt back? I'm starting to feel a stretch in my glutes and my hamstrings. Can I push any further? No. If I go any lower, that's gonna come from my lower back, not my glutes and my hamstrings. I don't wanna do that. Let's end the rep, okay? So we're gonna have you guys go through a good morning hip hinge. One thing that we've probably had you do in here as well that really, really helps with this exercise, remember, we're doing a lower body pull, not a lower body push. We don't want this to turn into a squat. We already did that. We don't want to focus on that. We want this to be a hinge where we work these muscles. One really easy way to make sure you're doing that is keep the back of your knees against a bench. This is going to force you to do a proper hinge. If we're keeping those knees against the bench, all that I want you to think about is how far can I push my butt across that bench? I'm pretending that I'm going to sit down, but I'm not actually sitting. If my knees leave the bench, I'm squatting now. I'm no longer hinging. I'm going up and down, not forwards and backwards with my hips. So let's go ahead. If you guys need a bench today, I highly encourage it. This doesn't make it easier. It makes it correct. Let's do it.
Dow, kettlebells.
With those kettlebells, most of us have done this before, but we're going to start holding this behind the hips, just like Molly is right here. I want you guys to make sure that we're keeping a nice tight grip on those weights, shoulders down and back, and push that butt as far back across the bench as you're able to. Get a real big stretch here. Make sure those knees are staying in contact with the bench if we're on it. Little extra things to think about to get all of those muscle fibers working. Pretend that we have a glute loop on. You guys all just had a band around your knees. Let's rip that newspaper like Molly was explaining and push our butt back. You're gonna start to feel the sides of your glutes working a little bit more.
And notice, keep your toes on the floor. Try not to rock back so far that you feel unbalanced. Keep the toes down.
Now we hope that after being in this gym for a few weeks and months, you guys see the benefits in your daily life of what movement can do for you. A lot of us also are in here to change. We have goals in here. We want to change our body composition. We want to see those little muscle fibers that we're working every day get more definition. As we want to see the results in the mirror of what we're doing in the gym, some of us, and that's okay. This is going to help us get that definition. It's going to get those little muscles that we don't commonly work as much, like the sides of our glutes, our hips. It's going to make sure that they're working more efficiently. You're going to get a better effect from your workouts out of these.
Of a lot of the exercises that I know you guys have all done this one in here. It's typically always in the cycle of workouts.
If you had one exercise to hit the checklist of your upper body push, your upper body pull, don't think too deeply into what your body's actually doing through the movement, but what muscle groups we're actually using. What one exercise checks off all of those muscle groups, all of those boxes. Did you just give her the answer? A farmer carry. You are using every single muscle fiber in your body. Okay? Respect to the farmers.
Respect.
That's why they call it farmer strength. No. But we are technically doing a deadlift to even pick those weights up. You're stabilizing. You're pushing your arms down and activating your lats. I know it's technically not a push where you're activating your chest, but you are walking, you're using a lower body push, you're pulling yourself through each step. You're getting really technical through it, but you're using every single muscle fiber in your body. So let's apply it a little bit. Let's go ahead. I want you guys at this point to challenge yourself a little bit. Don't think about, can I go heavier than I ever have before? Think about, am I walking efficiently with weights that I normally use, but do I feel better? Do I feel like I'm getting more muscle activation as I go through these steps? Before I even pick these weights up, I'm glagging. My lats, my glutes, my abs, my grip, once I grab those handles, are activated. I stay as tight as I can. I deadlift this off the floor. If I had a mirror in front of me, I'd try to stay as symmetrical as possible. I think about cracking the earth and leaving a footprint in the cement as I walk through. I go heel to toe. I'm nice and steady. I'm not topsy-turvy left to right. Notice how I'm not touching my legs. That's not because I'm holding my hands out. It's because I'm holding my lats so tightly that they're propping my arms up out to the side. So let's go ahead, grab 2 challenging kettlebells, nothing too heavy, and let's go ahead and walk around a little bit.
If you typically elevate the floor up for deadlifts, though, make sure you are also doing it for your carry.
Think about everything we talked about today. If we can't touch our toes, we probably need to elevate those kettlebells to properly lift that off the floor.
Think of that glag.
Shoulders down and back.
Yep.
Tight
Think
grip.
about
We shouldn't see
smushing the
any
oranges.
fingertips
Squeeze
here.
the orange. Yes. Do you see what just happened with those kettlebells? Good. I also want to bring up another point. A lot of times when we're going through our coaching and in the demo, we tell you where you want to feel it. If you are not feeling it, and that's not the main spot, tell us, because there's other different priming techniques that we can do. Like I know I've used glute bridge holds before deadlifts to make sure that you're using your glutes. There are little tricks that we know, that we've studied, that we can apply. So if you're not feeling it in that main spot, tell us, because we want you to feel it there.
And if we go over that and you notice that, think of like your gorilla rows. I know I've had a lot of you guys do that, and you look at me and you're like, my legs. Joanne, I can think of you specifically. We've been down here doing our gorilla rows, and she'll look up and she's like, is this supposed to be on fire? So that's why it's important to make sure that you're understanding where you should feel things, but also knowing if you're doing a back exercise and a back and bicep, and you're pulling and rowing, but you're feeling it in the legs, that's why we do those primer exercises. You are gonna be using a lot of legs and core. Almost everything we do in here, from a bicep curl to a band pull apart, we showed you, you can do a band pull apart and have your quads burning if you're doing it correctly. You're gonna be burning more calories throughout the day. Most of us, I'd say, wouldn't be opposed to stepping on an in-body and seeing a decrease in body fat and an increase in muscle mass. Those are the little efforts that are going to make it even more efficient of a process.
Moral of the story, ask questions if you have questions.
That's what we're here for. That's what you guys come in for, coaching. Hopefully you come into this next week and we have a new phase and you have a new mindset that you're like, you know what, maybe for these next 4 weeks, I'm gonna really push myself on my primer exercises. Can't hurt anything. Let's see the benefits that you reap out of that, and come back to me 4 weeks from now and tell me that you're not excited to learn more in the next one.
But yay, good job, guys.